54-year-old Randy Bratschi had been a police officer in Florida before becoming a master electrician. He decided to accept a job in the mechanical department for a Florence County, South Carolina paper mill. He moved to Coward, South Carolina, whose population hovers around 700 residents. Randy was easy to get along with, which allowed him to make friends wherever he went. He was a hard worker who loved to hunt and fish. He had a generous spirit and enjoyed helping those down on their luck. He was able to purchase 22 acres, a mobile home, and a small boat. He was enjoying his life that he worked hard for. Part of that enjoyment was meeting up with friends at local bars for an ice-cold beer. That's where, in 2004, Randy met 40-year-old bartender Brenda Miles. Twice divorced, Brenda had 2 children, a daughter, and a son, Frankie, who was 18. She had always been a tomboy and had no problem working farming, house painting, and other physical jobs. Anything to get by. Times had always been a bit tough for her financially. Randy and Brenda hit it off with their shared love of fishing and hunting and all things outdoors. She fit in with his group of friends. They hit it off so well, in fact, that within a matter of 3 months, they were married, and Brenda and Frankie moved into Randy's home. Brenda's days of financial struggle were over. 6 months into the marriage, on October 22, 2004, Randy noticed a large portion of his savings and almost everything from his checking accounts were missing after his card was declined at a store. He inquired with his bank. They informed him of frequent withdrawals consisting of hundreds of dollars at a time. He knew only he and Brenda had access to the account. He went home and asked Brenda to go to the bank with him to get this sorted out. She agreed. They took off towards town. On the way, Brenda started to feel sick and asked Randy to turn back to the house. He did so. Once there, Brenda ran inside while Randy waited for her by his truck. Brenda snuck out the back door, went around, and attacked Randy, bashing him in the head with a wooden tire thumper, most often used by truck drivers to check air pressure in their tires. The first blow or two dropped Randy to his knees. Brenda continued to swing at his head. She swung so feverishly that she broke the tire thumper in 2. Randy was able to get to his feet and run towards his garden tools. He grabbed a hoe and was able to fend Brenda off long enough to get inside the house. Brenda jumped in her car and fled the scene. A short time later, 911 received a call from Brenda. She was claiming that Randy attacked her and tried to kill her. She showed up at the police department covered in blood. Police found it odd that her only injury, however, was a minor cut on her thumb. Meanwhile, 911 receives another call, this one from Randy. He tells how Brenda snuck up behind him, beat him mercilessly about the head, and how he was able to free himself. When law enforcement arrived at his home and saw his injuries, they knew the 2 stories didn't add up. Randy was taken to Lake City Hospital in nearby Lake City, South Carolina. Doctors determined Randy's left eye socket had been fractured, and he had severe head trauma and cuts. They said he was extremely lucky he had survived. During the investigation, friends and family suggested that Brenda had an addiction to video poker. At the time, video poker machines were very popular at many gas stations and truck stops. It was outlawed by order of the South Carolina Supreme Court in 2000, but that didn't stop some establishments from allowing customers to play the machines, even if they no longer paid out real money. They surmised that is where the missing money from Randy's account had gone. Brenda turned herself in and was charged with assault and battery with intent to kill. After a few days in jail, relatives paid her bond and she went to live with her sister. Randy took out a restraining order against her and began divorce proceedings. A month later, on November 26, 2004, Randy was nowhere to be found. He left work at 7 a.m. and was supposed to meet up with friends for a turkey shoot. It was the day after Thanksgiving, after all. All calls went unanswered or returned, and he didn't show up to work. All things uncharacteristic of Randy Bratschi. After the violent incident a month earlier, everyone feared the worst. A few days later, his black Isuzu Rodeo was found abandoned in a parking lot at DeWitt's Bluff Landing boat ramp at the PD River. A large-scale search commenced. His home, land, the banks of the river, and divers checked in the water. There were cadaver dogs and radar technology that could penetrate the ground. His diabetes and blood pressure medicines were left behind. There was no sign of Randy anywhere. Law enforcement questioned both Brenda, who was still facing prosecution and a possible 20-year sentence for her attack on Randy, and her son Frankie. Both claimed to know nothing about the disappearance. The case against Brenda was unable to be tried since the star witness and victim was missing. With suspicions high but no new leads, Randy's disappearance case went cold after about a year. By 2009, Randy's house went up for sale due to taxes owed. The new property owner was interested in removing the old mobile home and building a new structure on the site. A company was hired to come in and remove the trailer. On July 16th, while dragging the trailer away from its foundation, the tongue of the trailer dropped and dragged through the dirt. In doing so, it uncovered a blue tarp crudely buried beneath where the trailer had sat. As workers examined the tarp, a human skull rolled out. They immediately called the Florence County Sheriff's Office, who were baffled why the body had not been discovered during the extensive searches 5 years earlier. 5 months later, using the CAT scans from his assault by Brenda to compare to the skeletal remains, it was confirmed that Randy Bratschi had been found. A warrant was issued for Brenda and her now 23-year-old son, Frankie. On December 7th, they were taken into custody. Brenda was charged with his murder, while Frankie was charged with misprision of a felony in connection with the case. He was released the following morning on a personal recognizance bond. Brenda failed her polygraph examination. With the news of her son possibly facing murder charges as well, she finally confessed to investigators, saying it was the only thing she thought to do because she knew no one would believe she had attacked Randy out of self-defense back in 2004, and she didn't want to go to prison for 20 years. Her story was that on the morning of November 26, 2004, she passed Randy on the street. He wanted to talk to her and invited her back to his house. Once there, she says he told her he was going to take care of her for good and reached for a gun in his waistband. They struggled. She eventually got hold of the gun and shot and killed him. She says she panicked. She pulled the underpinning back and rolled his body under the trailer, covered him with a tarp and some dirt. She drove his rodeo to the river, hoping to stage a suicide, and tossed the gun in the water. Randy's friends and family maintained that he was terrified of Brenda after the initial attack. Not just worried, not just scared, but terrified. Her story made no sense to those who knew him. April 16, 2012, Brenda's trial started. Though her taped confession was deemed impermissible, prosecution was able to tie Brenda to the boat ramp where Randy's car was found. A nearby neighbor testified that Brenda, wearing camo and appearing disheveled but calm, knocked on his door the evening of November 26th, needing a ride home, which he obliged. He ended up dropping her off very close to Randy's property, most likely so she can retrieve her car and drive home. Frankie Miles was called by the defense and pled the fifth with every question asked. On April 19th, 2012, 8 years after his disappearance, Brenda was found guilty of the murder of Randy Bratschi. She was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Thank you for watching Justice Calls. Are you listening?